I now look to Bharti Patel to close the case for the proposition.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished speakers on both sides, this is really a tough one. I'm deeply honored and for giving me this opportunity to speak on a subject that I am very passionate about. I think the opposition member did mention that, although it was a bit boring, but that's fine. The opposition has tried their best to try and tell us that you can be, that consumption can be ethical under capitalism. But have they really made a case for it? Some really passionate points are great. This needs to be changed, as I think one of our speakers said on the opposite side, that right now, capitalism is, ethical consumption is not correct, unless it changes, and it is work in progress is what I heard. But right now, and that's the debate for now, right now, ethical consumption is not possible under capitalism. The choices that we make every day as consumers have consequences, and we all know that. But some of the consequences that capitalism seeks to shield from us, and I think this is kind of statements that were made. Everything is a click away. If you can afford it, you can have it. Literally demanding people to get on their bikes and deliver you whatever it is that you might want at that moment. But the price fails to take into account the full cost. Whether it's in terms of the environment, we've heard quite a lot about that, depletion of resources, pollution of water, actually directly affects the lives and livelihood and the health and well-being of those people that rely on that ecosystem, that rely on water as their drinking source. Livelihoods of men and women are also affected by unethical consumerism. Many of these people that work, that produce the items that we are consuming, are not only being paid low wages, but they are in far-off lands, thousand miles away from here. So we don't see them. They are invisible workers, and therefore it doesn't affect us directly. But most of all, the full cost of the products that we are consuming right now is of human suffering and denial of human flourishing. I'm going to go a bit further on that. The opposition quite rightly has argued that it provides employment, of course, and it lifts the local economy. I have no problem with that. And then it lifts people out of absolute poverty. But simply, what I would say is that this, excuses about employment increases, lifting local economies, is nothing but a fig leaf that covers up capitalism's motive to get into a country where they can have free access to resources and people to exploit. A reminder talked about it lifts people out of absolute poverty. Can I just remind you what absolute poverty is? The definition is, and this is United Nations definition, it's anyone whose income is below $1.90 a day. That's one day. Hardly anything to celebrate if we're talking about companies entering into countries and lifting people out of absolute poverty. A simple principle holds here. It's corporations will go anywhere where they can reduce their costs and responsibilities at absolute minimum. Low-income countries, in turn, are forced to compete with each other to see who can offer the lowest cost for foreign direct investments, lowest cost for their companies, the companies to enter their country, so they can prosper in the way the opposition's just said this. So what do they get? They get very cheap labor, they get supply to water sources, they get land, they get transport, they get communications, and later on, please. They even get tax holidays, anti-union policies and weak employment regulations. Hence, the companies that are going to invest in some of these countries, they're investing it for their own interest, not for the interest of the workers in those countries. It is a race to the bottom. Under capitalism, profit trumps planet, and people. For ethical consumption, you and I then are expected to make a decision. We're expected to find out what the connection is between the product and the context in which it is produced in. But we shall never know this fully because corporations and businesses are not transparent, and they are not required to be transparent under the law. Giving us access to information that does not portray the company in best possible light is just too scary for businesses. They fear that they will lose our custom. I'm going to take fashion as an industry. I think we've talked a little bit about this. It's the biggest globalized industry and the most hyper-capitalist business. It generates $2.5 trillion annually. I stand here before you, and people's mentioned that, in a very well-dressed manner, and I talk about ethical consumption. Yes, of course, it is contradictory and is, can't remember that word, but we'll leave it at that. When I know that these dresses, these clothes, and some of the ones that you're all wearing are made by people that are denied their basic human rights. Let me talk about what these rights are. We're talking about rights to life, liberty, and freedom from slavery. Right to be treated with dignity without discrimination. And a right to live and work in a safe and healthy environment. Unethical practices and modern-day slavery is common knowledge. There's so much information on this. And it's an open secret. 16 million people are exploited in the private sector, such as construction, agriculture, fashion, and domestic work. More than 11 million women and children are paid well below the living wage, if at all. They're forced to do overtime in unsafe working conditions, denied maternity pay, denied sick pay, and denied any time off from work. Sexual harassment, gender discrimination is common in many of the factories in the countries that we are talking about here. It's hardly ethical, not now, it's hardly ethical. Over 800 million people have no access to safe drinking water when it takes 2,700 liters of water to make just one t-shirt. At the same time, 10 of the largest clothing brands were paid a total of $21 billion to their shareholders in dividend and stock buybacks. In Bangladesh, we heard quite a lot about Bangladesh. The minimum wage for garment workers is $94 per month. The living wage in Bangladesh is estimated at $569 per month. As you can see, a huge difference between what the minimum wage is and what the living wage should be. Leicester, let's bring it all back home. In Leicester, many Asian women making clothes for Boohoo and other high street retail brands were paid £3.50 an hour. The minimum wage in this country is £8.72 an hour. Boohoo, in contrast, posted record revenues of $857 million in 2019. Unethical practices exist both in fast fashion as well as in luxury brands. So let's not get away that this is just about fast and cheap fashions. Fashion consumption is neither personal, we raised that earlier, nor individual, but it's necessary for upholding a vast, intricate global capitalist economy. Fashion conditions you and I to expect a constant stream of new items to accumulate, discard readily. I'm going to come to what the present situation. This is COVID. We're in times of COVID. COVID has actually exposed some of the very extreme unethical and irresponsible behavior of the corporations in a capitalist society. Their actions have revealed their power over suppliers and ultimately the workers. When 9 million people lost their lives, 14 million people lost their jobs, $3.7 trillion of labor income was lost. What did the billionaires get? Their net worth increased by $1 trillion. Unable to sell their products because the world was under lockdown. What was their action? They wanted to preserve their profit. Their action was to suspend and cancel all the orders that they had agreed with their suppliers in countries like Bangladesh, like Vietnam, like Ethiopia, and many others. They refused to pay for completed orders. They demanded better payment terms and sharp discounts on the clothes that they were already in their possession. $16 billion worth of goods were not paid for. $40 billion worth of wages owed to garment workers at the beginning of the COVID crisis. One retailer told Tradecraft Exchange it would pay the supplier only after 70% of their supplier product had been sold. The terms in the contract allowed them to do that because they had the power to dictate the terms. Workers were dismissed overnight without any pay and left in destitute. Cancelling orders is a violation of human rights. However, the action of global brands showed no apparent concerns for the impact on the suppliers, as well as the millions of workers whose labor had supported the industry and fueled their profits. If there was ever a moment for industry and the corporation to step up and show leadership, this would have been. Unsurprisingly, many did not choose to. I'm going to come there quickly. A lot of brands are talking about being ethical, concerned about climate changes, and therefore wanting to change this. Only 3% of the market is devoted to the production of ethical goods. Less than 1% is recycled. There is no capacity to recycle at the rate at which we are producing. Under capitalism, the business model is that of extractive, based on unending growth and high turnover and mass profit. This is the very antithesis of sustainability. The motion today is about ethical consumption. It's a thin conception. What is ethical, if it can allow market relationships which do not promote human flourishing. This should be our standard of what counts as truly ethical consumption, a standard well above what is required by law, and therefore people should support this motion of the House. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Thank you.